Hello, welcome into this edition of the Seagull Sports Zone. Again, I'm Chris Mackowiak, sports editor of The Flyer and also play-by-play announcer at the Seagull Sports Network. Alongside me today, joined by two close friends, Drew Kessler, also a play-by-play announcer at the Seagull Sports Network, also a new staff writer at The Flyer. Alongside him also, Zach Gilleland, who has been a consistent staff writer for The Flyer for just approaching a year now, and also joining recently the Seagull Sports Network as a broadcaster. So now today, of course, on Monday, the selection show came out, and Salisbury made the tournament, one of the higher at-large bids, and luckily for the Seagulls, despite losing 3 of the last 4, they got into the tournament in a historic moment for the program and Coach Sachs. 3 straight years Salisbury has now made the tournament. That is the first in time in program history that has occurred, and of course they're trying to build on that. But the key this season, that trio of 3 seniors, Whitmer, Jeter, and Wyatt Smith, leading the charge, and now with everyone healthy on this team, maybe they can do some damage in the tournament. And now, guys, we'll start first by analyzing the end of the season. We all got to watch that CAC championship together, and it was in typical CNU Salisbury fashion that it came down to a final shot. That shot coming 1.2 seconds left, and a familiar face to Seagulls fans everywhere. Tim Daly hits a wide-open, about 19-foot jumper to seal it after Regenball next to him, Kevin Regenball, that is the guard of CNU, was triple-teamed. Tim Daly wide open. He has the range. He hit it. And Salisbury just couldn't get a shot off with 1.2 seconds left. Giddings, of course, providing his classic quarterback pass down the court. Couldn't find a man going for the Leitner play, but Salisbury falls once again in the CAC championship. So a bitter end to the season, but they are solid entering the tournament. I mentioned they are fully healthy once again. Whitmer may be 85, 90%, but he's still back out on the court.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. And it was really important for the Salisbury team to finish the season strong after those really 2 tough losses, the last 2 regular season games, losing at St. Mary's, Maryland, and at Frostburg State. Two really bad losses for Salisbury. So I was really impressed with how Salisbury was just able to regroup and finish the season on a positive note with having some momentum with the huge double overtime win over York. And if they lost that game, they would have been really on the bubble or not even making the NCAA tournament if they were not able to win that semifinal CAC matchup against York. And then the Christopher Newport game, once again, we've seen it 2 games this year against Christopher Newport with on the road both times, winning for pretty much the majority of the game to the last couple minutes of the second half with Newport hitting some clutch shots and big moments. So a heartbreaking loss for Salisbury with that tough conference championship loss to Newport 2 years in a row now. But Salisbury's got to have a lot of momentum with on the road in a hostile environment, the number 3 ranked team in the country, able to play them right down to the wire. It gives Salisbury really some momentum that they can, they're in their head knowing that they can play with any team in the country going into the tournament.
And this season and last season combined, Salisbury now 1-5 against the captains. Really close games, but that making the big difference, especially this season, and all 3 games are within 2 points as a final scoring margin. And Zach, Drew brought up a great point. Recently, Salisbury, trouble just keeping leads, trouble closing. You saw that in the York loss earlier this season, and the St. Mary's and Frostburg State losses. Huge leads just going by the wayside, and of course against CNU up by 9 or 10 points.
Yeah, the best teams in the country know how to close out when it's a really close games, and Salisbury is obviously one of the better teams in the country, but you can't win games when you can't finish. And you saw Frostburg State, not a very strong team in the conference, weren't able to finish it out, but a great job against York in the CAC tournament semifinal to win it. But as you said, the Christopher Newport, it was just a tough loss. So let's see how it'll go on Friday night.
And now, before we get into the bracket and everything, doing some bracketology here, let's lay out the positives we see in the Salisbury team. Number 1, they don't rely on the 3 like they did last year. Much better balanced offense. Everyone's healthy. And the main con I see to this team is the ability to close out games. Anything else you guys see out on the court, there's plenty to pick at, both personal for players and also as a team.
Well, definitely for the team, free throws have been losing all these games lately with allowing teams to come back. You got to make your free throws in clutch moments, and we saw it specifically on that double overtime game against York. if Salisbury able to make their free throws in the second half, it wouldn't have gone to overtime to begin with. So for this team, just gotta it's shown it all year. They've shooting around 73% from the line for a team. So they definitely shown that they can hit the free throws, but just got to practice on hitting them in the crucial situations with all the pressure on the line for the Salisbury team. And like we've seen it all year with them, definitely in the second half of the season, blowing a lot of these second half leads, which is very unusual for this team. Just definitely got to secure the ball and finish the game strong.
Yeah, that's been the big difference. A team that last year and earlier this year were used to hitting those free throws when they mattered most. Lately, just haven't been able to hit. Whitesmith has been at the line a lot, but he does shoot about 67% for the season, but he just hasn't been able to hit them. Jack Ferguson came around in that York game. He was 1 of 4 for the season from the charity stripe coming into the game. He hit a couple key ones, and it's just the team needs to rally around converting those free points at the end of the day. And we remember, I remember talking with Drew about this, the Ramapo game. Big reason they lost that. A 1-point loss to the New Jersey Athletic Conference champions would have been a huge resume win. Basically, they lost that due to free throws at the end of the day.
Yeah, and free throws, they're the easiest buckets you'll ever get. They're free points, so anytime you have a struggle hitting free throws, it may not go in your favor.
Yeah, and we can easily be very critical of the team. All three of us covered the Salisbury team all season. Let's lay out the pros now about this team. Veteran experience in these 3 big-time seniors. Coach Sachs has told me Whitmer has really stepped up to be what he calls the MVP of the team this season, to fill a role that they really needed. I think it's a team with excellent balance between youth and veteran talent. But you look at this team now with these 3 seniors, and this year was the time. They had some slip-ups towards the end of the season, but this year was it. And they can still get it done, plenty of time. They're not going to be hosting, but I have to point out on the NCAA selection show, Salisbury was one of the only teams that got a video piece and about a minute of the analysts talking about them, despite in their little section of 4 teams, them, Endicott, Nichols, and the host, Newman, Salisbury probably the 2 seed in that grouping. They got plenty of attention. I think they are a silent upset pick to go deep in this tournament, and I think it's that balance and veteran talent people are really realizing and peaking at the right moment. Off of a loss, we saw the Salisbury men's lacrosse team, losing the CAC championship. They went deep, and Coach Sachs even alluded to that when he was talking to me after the selection show and said, last time I checked, just because you lose the conference championship doesn't mean you're out of the national championship conversation.
Yeah, and definitely for Salisbury, one of the main impressive things for this team with having so much motivation and a lot of people picking them for upset pick going for the tournament is the experience level for this team, with a lot of these players returning from last year where they made it to the NCAA tournament, had a heartbreaking loss in the first round, but 3rd year in a row now making the NCAA tournament. And with the amount of experience that they have, that's dangerous for any team. And with everybody now pretty much fully healthy and hoping that Justin Whitmer will be close to 100%, with now pretty much a full week off, coming off that Christopher Newport game and you could see throughout the tournament with the York game and the Newport that he was slowly improving throughout the game with trying to heal up. And for this team, being fully healthy now with all the weapons back, and we've seen all year these close games where clutch shots from Justin Whitmer, who's had some big ones. Of course, Chad Barsikowski with 2 game winners on 3-pointers. So it's huge expectations for this team going into the season, and they've really proven it. And now going to the NCAA tournament after a late slide, but with the experience that they have and showing that they can match any of the top teams in the country with playing Christopher Newport right down to the wire, 3 games. So they can play with any team in the country and should be a dangerous team to watch out for.
Yeah, you said it. I think that loss against Christopher Newport really adds fuel to the fire because with the experience of this team, they play Christopher Newport so tough every year. And so they had them beat that game. They just couldn't pull it through at the end. So this is a team that you said 3 consecutive NCAA tournament appearances. They've been here before. They've had heartbreaking losses before, but this is the time for the senior core to really take that next step and show what Seagull basketball is about.
And now with that, let's take a deeper look into the bracket, into the matchup here. As I mentioned before, they will face Endicott up in Aston, Pennsylvania. That's the host location of Newman University, top team in the Atlantic region, and now getting to host these first couple matchups, first and second round action. Of course, Endicott, just a little bit of information about them. Also, mascot, the Gulls. Of course, Salisbury, the Seagulls. So it's been a fun Twitter battle recently. And their location, in case you're not familiar, just a little bit north of Boston, suburb up there, I believe Beverly, Massachusetts, is their official location. And the team plays in the Triple C, CCC, Commonwealth Coast Conference. They got to the championship, lost to Nichols, who is actually playing opposite them against Newman. So interesting from the NCAA putting two teams that close to each other from the same conference. Looking at their schedule, just a bit of information about their resume. They lost at Babson earlier this season. A team that ended up being number 3 overall in the nation entering this tournament, got an at-large bid after they fell to MIT in their conference championship. Endicott lost that game 72-60. They did beat a Middlebury team that is one of the top seeds in Salisbury section of the bracket, 93-89. That was their third game of the season, so very early on. Other highlights, Salem State, a team that got not an at-large bid, but they did get their conference championship. That was an 82-64, pretty easy win for Endicott. Other than that, the two games against Nichols really highlight. Beat Nichols on their at Endicott 93-80. They met up again during the regular season, 92-87 at Nichols. Endicott took that loss. And then in the conference championship, of course, Endicott falling 67-64. They acquired one of the at-large bids here on the table, 21 of them, of course, overall. Endicott 22-6 overall this season, 15-3 in conference. And just talk about the bracket a bit. Salisbury faces Endicott, of course, 5:30 Friday night. Newman will host Nichols, 7:30 Friday night. So the winner of those two will face Saturday at 7 p.m. Of course, here on Seagull Sports Zone, hoping that's the Seagulls, but have to be realistic. Endicott, a very good team, worthy of an at-large bid. Squeaked in there a bit, but deserving of it. So put together a great season and a talented offense, averaging over 81 points per game, and something that will really test the Seagulls' defense. And most notably, guys, in this matchup, I see the amount of threes Endicott has taken this season. Drew, Zach, and I talked about this just before we came on. Looks like Salisbury's team a year ago, a Salisbury team very reliant on the three. This Endicott team with about 150 more threes attempted this season than Salisbury. They are 11th in the nation in attempted three-pointers. So a team that likes to really put up the numbers offensively, but if you can get stops with the Salisbury defense that prevents the three most times, only giving up 28% to opponents from beyond the arc. And it could end up coming down to how many threes Endicott hits.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough matchup for Endicott, as their game definitely relies on the three-pointers. And like you just mentioned, Chris, with Salisbury's game is on defense is one of the best at stopping the three-point game, with second in the nation, like you just mentioned, but stopping the three-pointers. But for this Endicott team, you can definitely tell that their offensive tempo is really fast-paced. So it's going to be really important for Coach Sachs to get on his team early in the game to make sure you're not celebrating after made baskets, but hurrying back on defense and not give up any easy transitional layups for Endicott, because this team's definitely looks like, with the amount of points that they score per game in the 80s, it's definitely going to be an up-tempo game. So Salisbury's got to focus on going back on defense and also not trying to get tricked up into Endicott's game. Salisbury's offense got to make sure that they play the style that they played all season, not rush shots, and also not trying to play Endicott's three-point matchup, and also just have a mixed offense going down low and find the open threes that you can.
Yeah, we've seen this season Barskowski get carried away with the threes sometimes. Barry Braden even at the top of the key. But this Salisbury defense, not as high marks as they had entering the postseason last season, but the defense only giving up 66 points per game, 15 less than what Endicott averages. So defense can hold in there despite this Endicott offense.
Yeah, and Salisbury, I think, matches up pretty well with Endicott. You see Salisbury plays a team that's a little bit like Endicott and York. York 3 times this year we've played them, and Salisbury really defended the 3 really well, especially in that the CAC tournament semifinal game. Sharpshooter like Matt Scamuffo, he was really limited in that game. So I think Salisbury, Endicott, they're a really big three-point shooting team, but when you have a matchup like Salisbury, I think that they can match up with them fairly well.
And a trouble spot I want to highlight too, potentially. Salisbury shoots 42% generally from the field. That's 306th in all of Division III. Endicott, one of the best field goal percentage defenses in the nation, 13th, first in their conference at 39%. So trouble spot, we have seen games out there where Salisbury hasn't been able to, period, just shoot.
Oh, definitely. We've seen a lot of stretches, and especially in the example of that St. Mary's game late in the regular season when it was a tie game with about 7 minutes to go, and Salisbury just couldn't find a basket, with St. Mary's ending on that big run to get the double-digit win over the Seagulls. So it's been important for the Salisbury team to play the full 40 minutes. We've seen several times where they just had some slight hiccups and some runs during games, and Salisbury's got to focus definitely in the NCAA tournament. Cannot afford to have any let-ups throughout the game, because all you need is a 3-minute period without scoring any baskets. That's all the time the opponent needs to come right back into the game.
Yeah, definitely. And looking deeper into the statistics, we talk about how good Salisbury is at not fouling. I believe they're still under 17 personal fouls per game. They're actually at 17.1. That number was a bit lower a few weeks ago, of course. But also their free throw percentage, looking at that in the same type of category, 71%. We've seen that way higher, especially last season as a team. Looking at Endicott, honestly, a lot of their stats look like Salisbury last year before this transformation under Sachs this season around. Free throw percentage as a squad, 76%. I believe that's about where Salisbury was last year. 27th in the nation are the Gulls. And personal fouls per game, 16.1, 43rd in the nation at 16.1. So a team that doesn't foul too much and shoots very well at the free throw line. A team that Coach Sachs wants to have, but they just haven't been there the last few games. And that might be a problem for Salisbury. They've been fouling a bit too much recently, and putting the goals at the line obviously could be a problem for them. Now, looking at some of the players on this Endicott team, apologize for the pronunciations. I can't find the pronunciation guide on Endicott because it says contact the sports information representative, so instead of just posting it. But looking generally at the overall group, there seems to be 2 players that average double figures in points per game. Daquan Sampson, senior forward, and also Max Matroni at 13.6 points per game. He's a senior guard, so clearly senior leaders for this team, leading in points. Also Kamal Walker, a third player averaging double figures, 17.9 points per game, leading the team in scoring. But just looking at this, not a lot of injuries to their starters this season, clearly. Starting all games this season, 28 starts are Kamal Walker, number 2, number 4, Daquan Sampson, number 28, Stephen Baston, number 24, Chris Lipscomb, and also Matroni with 28 starts of his own. So 5 key starters. Salisbury, of course, it's been a merry-go-round with injuries here and there, and people acknowledge the amount of injuries. But Coach Sachs has told me multiple times, it doesn't matter what your injuries are, whatever. NCAA committee does not care. It's your resume, what you do overall. And we saw that with the Frostburg State loss. And honestly, looking at this bracket, Susquehanna is hosting. They lost early in their conference tournament. And you can speculate all you want, but I really think the Salisbury team would have been hosting this week if they wouldn't have fallen to the Bobcats on the road, Frostburg State, that is. But, of course, that's all hypothetical situations. Now they face Endicott on the road. Endicott team that we also have to talk about, they're going to have bus lag. Trip from Boston to the western suburbs of Philadelphia. Not an easy trip through New York City and all around. A lot of rumors before the selection show, honestly, were about Seagulls going to New England to play. So very fortunate for this team that they're going about 2.5 hours north to Newman University. Just highlighted a lot of things there, but just want to get you guys' thoughts on Endicott, Salisbury's chances in this game, and also how the two teams match up, as we've just highlighted the last few minutes.
Yeah, the fascinating thing you just mentioned was definitely the bus ride.
Yeah.
It's a long bus ride for Endicott.
Hey, first I want to say it's about the distance of the SVU bus ride, which Coach Stack's quote told me I must experience sometime.
Yeah, so it should definitely be. It's always interesting to see how teams come out in the long travel, but I don't think it's going to be a huge factor with the NCAA tournament game. Both these teams are going to be going so much energy going into this game. So whatever live they're going to have, they're going to make up for it during the warm-ups with the energy from the crowd. So it won't be that huge of a factor in my opinion. But like I was mentioning earlier, this going to be a great matchup with Endicott on the run, offensive tempo, trying to shoot as many threes as they can. So really focused for Salisbury is cannot afford to go under screens and allow these open shooters to hit open threes. So just got to make sure you attack the screeners and get above the screen. So trying to force Endicott to get the ball down low, which is not their game. They're trying to find those three-pointers. So for the Salisbury defense, just got to prevent the three-point shot, which they've been so good at all season.
Yeah, and this is a really good Endicott team. I think one of the keys for Salisbury is to slow down the tempo. You see Endicott, a high up-tempo team, they want to take quick shots. But if you're Salisbury, hold the ball maybe a little bit longer, try to find it down low to Jeter or Wyatt, and just really kind of limit the turnovers and keep the ball out of Endicott's hand. You see they're one of the top shooting teams in the country. They have a guy, Chris Linscomb, who's shooting nearly 60%. And their top scorer, 48% from the field and even 38% from the three-point line. So really just limit the amount of opportunities that Endicott has and really just hold the ball a little more on offense and find the open shots.
Kamal Walker, also all-time leading scorer for the program, actually got that mark on January 31st. Has 502 points this season. Very impressive from him. This is actually the first meeting ever between these two schools, so it should be exciting, and part of why there's been all the Twitter fun between the Gulls and the Seagulls, who gets to keep the hashtag #GoGulls. Hashtag that I nearly put on every tweet about Salisbury, so we'll see how that goes around. Just to sum up the bracket in Salisbury's top right corner area, Williams College hosting. They are looking New England, Susquehanna, another Mid-Atlantic team. They are hosting. Newman, of course, hosting, and Middlebury up in New England also hosting. So Salisbury, either way, is going to have a lot of travel time. Might as well win when they're only 2.5 hours away. But we'll see what happens. Friday night, we'll be definitely watching along. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at C Mackowiak, SGSM. Drew and Zach also on Twitter if you want to put your social media out there, get some follows.
At _Zachariah G.
And at Drew Kessler 14.
You're no fun, Drew. But should be a good one for sure. Of course, NCAA tournament action is always fun, but there's something special about March Madness. D3 field is even more wide open, and the Seagulls, as now the number 16 team in the nation, will look to advance further than they did a season ago when they lost 75-73 to actually Middlebury College in the first round held at Stockton University. We're all working in some capacity this weekend or in the next few days. Drew, you'll be actually good weekend for you. You're at the softball stadium grand opening, and you're covering the opening tournament. A lot of hours you'll be working out there, but it should be fun one. You'll be talking to head coach Margie Knight later this week. I'm on baseball tomorrow against Washington College. Sunday will be men's lacrosse against Ohio Wesleyan. Zach has the call of both baseball game, actually 3 baseball games this weekend. Dickinson doubleheader Sunday, but also Franklin Marshall Saturday baseball game. So Drew with softball, Zach with baseball. Anything you want to say about those teams? Because I definitely want to give the love around to all the Salisbury athletics.
Yeah, well, for softball, I'm really excited for this opening in the Seagull Stadium at softball. And remember last year. I'm just excited to go in the booth for
Yeah,
softball. I remember last year, Chris, we used to call the games behind the right field fence. So.
yeah. I said to the assistant SID today, Justin Farrell, I remember guessing what would happen at home plate or what the pitch was.
So we'll definitely have a better view for balls and strikes to critique the umpires. But but yeah, it should be an interesting start with kind of a tough start for the Salisbury team. 2-4 record to begin the season with being predicted to win the CAC conference. So a lot of expectations, but kind of expected some ups and downs to begin the season with such a new squad with only having 10 returning players from last year. But definitely for the Salisbury team with Brooke Moselle, the star pitcher with her sophomore year coming back, having a rough start with a 7.20 ERA to begin the season, but had a monster freshman year with a 1.110 ERA. But she's also been talking about adding new pitches, so that might be a result of having the rough start, trying to add those new pitches into her command. So, but for the Salisbury team, definitely expect them to find their groove now, coming back home after playing in that North Carolina tournament and 2 road games at Virginia Wesleyan, who's ranked 19th in the country. So for the Salisbury team, I definitely expect them to really pick it up during the season and start to find their stride going into the conference play during the middle of the season.
And for you, Zach, anything on the baseball diamond? Of course, we're familiar with the defensive struggles and pitching struggles that Salisbury's trying to overcome.
Well, as opposed to the grand opening of the new facility, I will be in that dark, cold cave that is the baseball broadcast booth. But I think Salisbury has a good chance to rather sweep or win the series this weekend against Franklin and Marshall and Dickinson. But I think they're coming off their toughest stretch where they played arguably 2 of the best teams in the entire country with Oswego State and Cortland State. They handled themselves against Oswego State, especially in the second leg of the doubleheader, the Jay Perry walk-off home run to cap a 5-run ninth. So I think that has given this team a little bit of added boost. We don't know where we know where the pitching's at right now. It's not in a good state. It's interesting to see who steps up for the Seagulls. Jeff Oster and Pete Grasso have been 2 of the best pitchers for Salisbury right now. So I know Coach Brohan's really looking for just another person to step up because there are a lot of tired arms, especially in that bullpen. Brohan's really had to burn through that bullpen. Salisbury, they're a really strong hitting team, but definitely pitching and defense really needs to step it up if the Seagulls want to go deep this year.
Yeah, and we've seen, you can tell a bit, Brohan's trying to experiment with this lineup. We've talked about before, new first baseman here, there. Jay Perry, of course, has been with the team, but he's newer. But the entire team, a lot of new players transferring in. They lost a bit of talent. So just trying to find that right balance. The only sure thing really at this point is, Tom Labriola's captain, playing catcher.
Yeah, Labriola, easily one of the heart and souls of this lineup. This is a lineup. You saw Brohan really switch it around. Jay Perry's been really solid at the first base position.
He's been really good, and you covered the walk-off the other day. Talk about that a little, what watching that was like.
After the letdown in the 9th inning where we gave up a Little League home run, that was really sucked the life out of the stadium. But Labriola, the leader of this team, leading off with a double, you just knew something was there. Then 2 straight walks, and then Scott Ardoin comes in, hits the 2-run single, make it 12-10, and that really got the crowd back into it. And then Oswego State turns their ace, and you think maybe that this is where the Seagull rally ends, but Jay Perry comes up, and as soon as the ball hits the bat, the entire crowd jumps up. I was one of them, and the ball jumps over the fence, and Perry slides in the home plate, and it was just a great way to finish the weekend, to split against one of the top teams in the country.
Yeah, and Oswego, number 12 in the nation. Who knows how that win will affect the Seagulls' resume if they're not able to win the CIC championship automatic bid at the end of the day. I'll be calling the game once again. Men's lacrosse hosting number 13 team in the nation, Ohio Wesleyan. Very tough opponent. Their only loss this season against the number 2 team in the nation, Rochester Institute of Technology. So not a big blemish on the schedule at all. A team that balances well both offensively and defensively in the past. But the big problem this season, a lot of new players on the defense. How do they handle the pressure, especially playing against the Seagulls? And what they will do on the road. Of course, Salisbury, Maryland, on the far distance from Ohio Wesleyan, so we'll see how they do. Of course, the offense should keep up with the Seagulls, but it'll all come down probably to the X and also what Salisbury can do on defense. How much can they stop Ohio Wesleyan earlier on in the game? Of course, there's a preview of that game from staff writer Brad Kelly online right now and in the latest print that you can check out. Also be at baseball tomorrow against Washington College, that being Thursday, 2:30 p.m. start now. And probably watching out for the same things Zach just talked about, but it'll be interesting to see a win Salisbury should have and one they should easily get if the pitching stays controlled and keeps the ball in there. Lastly, just wanted to get final thoughts. Anything you guys wanted to say before we sign off?
Definitely going to be a busy weekend for the whole Salisbury sports with basketball trying to keep their season alive, and huge weekend with the softball grand opening of the new stadium. So definitely a really exciting weekend for the Salisbury alumni fans.
Let's hope for a good week and prove to Endicott who the real Gulls are.
Yeah, sounds good. Endicott can stop with their Twitter campaign. Also, a poll was put out, and guess who's winning it? Salisbury, like 62% to 38%. When you have connections with the local media, that's how you do it here at Salisbury. There you go. Give it a good squawk for President Dudley Eschbach. We'll, of course, be here at Seagull Sports Network on the Flyer watching the Salisbury game Friday, 5:30 p.m. start, playing at Newman University, and that will be live streamed. Not sure the information around that, but check it out, suseagulls.com. Of course, stick with the Flyer for the latest coverage. We've been fantastic these last 2 semesters, covering nearly every home event, getting previews up and other stories, so stay tuned for that. And also any additional coverage of men's basketball going forward if they are able to advance into the second weekend of the tournament. Signing off here on the Seagull Sports Zone for Drew Kessler and Zach Gilleland, I am Chris Mackowiak, and stay tuned for our next podcast coming up in the near future.